Okay, hi guys. Today, or at least in this session, we are going to be talking about comparing averages and how we do that in a meaningful way. So, in the last jamovi tutorial, we talked about how to make scale averages per person, and then to see, using those scale averages, how we can compare, say, the US and Japan. But in the last jamovi session, we just looked at the numbers, like the average numbers, the average self-promotion, a Facebook self-promotion score in the US and in Japan, but we didn't use any statistical tests to see if those differences, those average differences, whether they made any sense or whether they were reliable differences. So we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at how we can compare averages meaningfully. So today's topic is comparing averages in jamovi. So in other words, is one group something rather than the other? Is one group taller than the other? Is one group bigger than the other? Is one smaller than the other? Right. So we'll be comparing averages to compare groups on a particular variable. So let's jump into this. Today we're going to be using a couple of particular variables to compare the US and Japan. And we're going to focus on why people might self-promote on Facebook or why they might not self-promote on Facebook. That is, that there might be benefits and demerits, or merits and demerits associated with promoting yourself on Facebook. Right, so some of the reasons why people might self-promote or show off on Facebook could be self-esteem. Right, if you talk about the cool things that you've done or the cool things that you think you've done, then that might boost your self-esteem. That might make you feel better about yourself. Some people might share the amazing things that they've done to connect with other high achievers. Right? If you tell everybody about the cool stuff you've done, then maybe other people who have done cool stuff might want to become friends with you. Right? Another reason might be in order to keep in touch with friends, just telling people what you've been up to. Another motivation for showing off on Facebook is because you think that might make other people feel happy, happy for you, regarding the things that you've done. And perhaps to make new friends, right? To kind of advertise yourself. Right? So these are some of the reasons why people might want to kind of show off or show the amazing things that they've done on Facebook. But there are a bunch of reasons why people might choose not to self-promote on Facebook or not to show off on Facebook. Right? Some people might feel that by talking about your amazing things that you've done, that might make other people jealous. You might not want to appear to be showing off. Right? So if you show your amazing things that you've done, the awards you've won, the really expensive watch that you've bought, perhaps that might appear to others as though you are showing off. You might fear that by showing off you might damage relationships. Right? You might feel that others might not be interested in the amazing things that you've done, even though you might be really keen on them. And you might be a little bit concerned about privacy. Right? So in this way, there are kind of merits and demerits associated with talking about the cool things or the amazing things that you've done on Facebook. Right? So people have motivations, that they might be motivated by the merits or the good things that might happen if you post on Facebook about the amazing things you've done. And on the other hand, some people might focus on the demerits, right? The bad things that might happen if they self-promote on Facebook. So we can, or in a previous survey, we wanted to see if there were any differences between the US and Japan on whether people focus on merits or demerits associated with showing off or self-promoting on Facebook. Right, so we had some ideas. We had some ideas that perhaps in certain countries people might think more about the merits of self-promoting, and in some countries people might focus on the demerits associated with self-promoting on Facebook. So we created a scale. So the Facebook self-promotion demerits and merits scales. So the demerit scale, the Facebook self-promotion demerit scale. We asked people in a survey in Japan and the US, we asked people on Facebook, what are the demerits of posting about things in your life that you're proud of? For example, your successes, achievements, and talents. Please indicate to what degree you agree or disagree with the following statements. We had 5 statements here. People who see my post will get jealous or feel uncomfortable. People will think that I'm a show-off. I will show things to people that they're not interested in. I might break my relationships with others. Information about myself will be leaked even to people I'd rather did not know that information. And then people responded from, I think, 1 to 6, I think it was. One was completely disagree and one was completely agree. Right? So higher numbers on this scale suggests a bigger focus on the demerits of posting about your successes and amazing things on Facebook. Right? And then we had a merits scale, or a Facebook self-promotion merits scale, which measures the degree to which somebody focuses on the merits associated with self-promoting or showing off on Facebook. So this scale went on Facebook. What are the merits of posting about about things in your life that you're proud of? For example, your successes, achievements, and talents. Please indicate to what degree you agree or disagree with the following statements. I can maintain my relationships, agree or disagree. I can make new friends and business partners. I can be appreciated by other people. It can spark conversations with others. In attracting the attention of others, I'll be able to get information about parties, dinner gatherings, and other useful information. People who view my posts will feel happy. It improves my self-esteem. Right? So we asked people to agree or disagree with these merit-focused statements. We also asked people to agree or disagree with the demerit-focused items. So I'd like you to just think right now, what's your expectation? In the US, in America, do you think people... now let me rephrase that. Comparing the US and Japan, in which country do you think people focus on the demerits of self-promoting on Facebook? All right, so if you asked a whole bunch of people these questions, these demerit scale items in Japan and the US, in which country would people focus on the demerits more? Japan or the US? What do you think? I think we can probably make a hypothesis or an expectation that perhaps Japan Facebook users focus on the demerits of self-promotion on Facebook more than US users. You know, we could come up with a whole bunch of reasons why that might be the case, but I would expect that in Japan, Facebook users would be kind of more focused on the demerits associated with self-promoting or showing off on Facebook than people in the US. Now, hypothesis 2 here. Who do you think would emphasize the merits or the good things associated with showing off on Facebook? Facebook users in the US or Facebook users in Japan? This is your homework. Hypothesis 2. This is part of your homework here, is to make a prediction. In which country, Japan or the US, do people focus on the merits associated with self-promoting on Facebook? Okay, and I'm going to get you to make a prediction and to test that prediction using data. Now, I'm going to go through how you do that using hypothesis 1. Okay, so we've got hypothesis 1 here, that our expectation is that Facebook users in Japan focus on the demerits of self-promotion on Facebook more than US users. Okay, so let's test that hypothesis together. Let's test our expectation that people in Japan will focus on the demerits associated with self-promoting on Facebook more than Facebook users in the US. So to do that, we're going to open up a new data set, so not the one that you used last week, but a new data set that has some extra variables, some extra scale items in it. So this data set has the self-promotion scale items that you looked at last week, and it also has some new scale items, self-promotion demerits scale items and self-promotion merits scale items. Okay, so we're going to open this up, this link here, and the link to this data set will be in the description below, and we're going to look for the variables called SPROM D. SPROM, so self-promotion, D, demerits. SPROM D, self-promotion demerits scale items. And what we will find is that there are 5 SPROM D scale item variables or columns in our data set. And we're going to need to transform those first. We're going to need to compute those into one self-promotion demerit scale score per person. Okay, so let's do that together. We made scale average scores last week, but let's do that again together. So I will need to open this file up. So if you click on that link in the description below, and also I will put the link in the Moodle course for this week. Have a look for that link, click on the link, and then you'll come to a page that will let you download the jamovi data file. So we click on download, and this is in Windows, but you'll have something, it'll download a file regardless of what browser you're in. I'd like you to open that file, and that should automatically open up jamovi. So now we have jamovi opened. We see all of these variables that we had last week. If we double click on that, we can see information about that variable. So we've got the start date, the survey start data, date should be. We have the end date, so the survey end date. Remember that each of the columns is a variable. So these are the responses that people in the survey that we did a couple of years ago made. These rows, these are people. So person or respondent number 1, respondent number 2, number 3, number 4, etc. If we go through the variables here, we've got friend underscore n. This is the number of Facebook friends. Facebook start m, the month the participant started using Facebook. So we can see what these variables are in the descriptions here. So we need to go through and see if we can find the S-Prom-D, self-promotion demerits scale items. So we've got S-Prom-1, S-Prom-2. These are the self-promotion scale items that you worked with last week. And here we go, S-Prom-D1, S-Prom-D2, S-Prom-D3, S-Prom-D4, 5, and here we got S-Prom-M1. Now this is the Facebook self-promotion merits scale items, but what we're interested first in is the self-promotion demerits scale. So the degree to which people focus on the demerits or the bad things about self-promoting on Facebook. So we're going to use these items here per person to figure out the average self-promotion demerits kind of focus score for each person. Right? So just like last week, we right-click here or control-click on Mac or double-finger tap on Mac. Just click on anywhere here on one of the columns and click Add Variable, and then insert a computed variable. Insert a computed variable. So when we do that, jamovi gives us an extra column here. It's called Z here, but that doesn't make much sense. So we'll rename that to self-promotion demerit. Merit average score. So this will be the self-promotion demerit focus. How do we call it? The focus score. So how much somebody focuses on the demerits associated with showing off on Facebook. Right, and we're going to compute this variable. So we're going to put in a formula here. We're going to add up. Remember, if we want to make a scale average, then we add up the responses to each item in the scale and then divide it by the number of items in the scale. So for this one, it would be S-Prom D1 plus S-Prom D2 plus S-Prom D3 plus S-Prom D4 plus S-Prom D5 divided by 5 items. So and you got to double check the variable names here that they're correct. S-Prom D1, S-Prom D2, S-Prom D3, 4, 5. That's okay. We're telling jamovi first of all, add up these responses to these items and then divide that total by the 5 items. Press enter or hit enter, and there you have it. You have a self-promotion demerit focus score for each person in the data set. Now that we have self-promotion demerit focus scores for each person, we want to compare the average self-promotion demerit focus score in Japan with the average self-promotion demerit focus score in the US. So we do that using a particular statistical test called a t-test. We use a special statistical test called a t-test. And we do this statistical test by clicking up here in t-tests. So we click t-tests and we do an independent samples t-test. Right? So our US sample and our Japan sample are independent of each other. and we want to compare those two independent groups or samples. So we click on Independent Samples t-test, and that brings up the jamovi t-test interface. You can see here we have all of the variables in our data set. We've got the S-prom, so self-promotions scale items. We have the individual self-promotion demerit focus scale items. We have the average, so this average that we've just created for the demerits focus scale. Down the bottom, we have the self-promotion scale average. We've got country, age, sex, all of these variables there. But we are interested in the difference between Japan and the US on the self-promotion demerit focus scale. So we're going to drag that into the dependent variables box. So drag the self-promotion demerit focus scale scores into the dependent variables box. And then the grouping variables. The grouping variable is country, because we want to compare the US and Japan, right? So country, we'll drag that into the grouping variables. And automatically, jamovi gives us some statistics here. They don't really mean much right now, but if we add some additional statistics, first of all, we want to have some descriptives. Click on descriptives, and here jamovi has given us some descriptive statistics. So the self-promotion demerit focus score in Japan is 3.81, and the self-promotion demerit focus score in the USA is 3.07. All right, so just looking at this would suggest that people in Japan focus a little bit more on the demerits associated with self-promoting or showing off on Facebook. All right, so we have the mean here, which is the average. We have the SD, which is the standard deviation. Now the question is this difference, does this difference mean anything? Is it reliable? Can we trust this difference here? And that is where a statistic called the p-value comes into play. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to go through what this p-value is in a moment. But we will use these results here to make some conclusions about whether this difference is reliable and means anything. There's one more thing we want to add here, and that is the effect size. So please make sure that you also have the effect size, and that will add Cohen's d to our results here. So effect size, that will add Cohen's d to our results. Okay, so that's how we do an independent samples t-test to compare groups, or in our case countries, on a particular variable. Now let me go through these results in a little bit more detail on what is it called? PowerPoint. So the independent samples t-test test results. So we have in our results, we've got the variable name, so the name of the variable that we are comparing. And we first want to look at the group statistics, group descriptives here. So we have the group Japan and the USA. The N here is the number of people in each group. So we've got 145 participants in Japan and 151 participants or Facebook users in the USA. The mean, so the average for each group on the self-promotion demerits focus scale is 3.81, and the average in the US is 3.07. And then we have the standard deviation, which gives us an idea of kind of how spread out the scores are in each country. So when we report on these results, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, when we report on these results, you will need the mean, so the average, and the standard deviation. These two values for each group, so for Japan and the US, you will need to report those. So those are the two important things to look for in t-test results. Now the next important thing is to check whether this difference in self-promotion focus scores, whether this is meaningful or not. Is it reliable? Right? Looking at the numbers, we can see that self-promotion demerit average is higher in Japan. So we might take this and say, well, this supports our hypothesis. Remember, our expectation was that Facebook users in Japan focus more on the demerits associated with showing off on Facebook. So just at face value, it looks as though our data supports that. But is this really a big difference? We need to answer that question, and that is where our independent samples t-test results come into play. So we have the variable name, self-promotion demerits average. We have a t-value. This is something that you will need to report. So we have the t-value, which is 6.01. Okay. Who cares? We'll see a more important value that will tell us a bit more about whether that's important or not. We have the degrees of freedom. I won't talk too much about what this is, but this is a value that you need to report when you report t-tests. This is the really important value here. One of the really important values is the p-value. What's important to know about the p-value is if the p-value is lower than 0.05, then we can say that this difference is significant. So if this p-value is less than 0.05, then we can say that this difference here is meaningful, that it's reliable, and that we can say, yes, there is a difference between the groups. Then we have Cohen's d, which is an effect size. Now this tells us how big the difference is. Okay, well, 0.699, what's that? If we round it up, that's 0.7. Is that a big difference or not? We need to look a little bit at the literature to answer that. So I'll go through that in a moment. So we have the average scores per country. We have the standard deviation per country. We have the t-value for the t-test. We have the degrees of freedom for the t-test. And we have the p-value for the t-test and the Cohen's d. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values are what you will report when you report the results from your independent samples t-test. But okay, so what is a p-value? The p-value is the probability you'd get the result if in fact the opposite was true. I'll say that again. The probability that you'd get the result if in fact the opposite was true. It's kind of difficult to get one's head around. What does this mean? So as an example, imagine you gave a sample of dogs and cats a survey about music preferences. The results say that dogs preferred electronic music more than cats. Okay, so imagine you gave a sample of dogs and cats a survey, told them go to this website, respond to this survey, and you found that the results said that dogs preferred electronic music more than cats. Right, the p-value tells you how probable your finding would be if actually cats preferred electronic music more than dogs. Put really simply, the p-value is the probability that the result you got in your data is wrong. The p-value, in really basic terms, the p-value is the probability that the result you got in your data is actually wrong. Okay, so remember that for p-value, we have got a few different types of p-value. Let me see if I can write this out. So remember, if p is less than 0.05, then we can say that the result that we got is reliable and significant. Right, so this p-value, if the p-value is 0.05, let's say you got a p-value that was 0.05. That means that there is a 5% chance that your result is actually wrong. But put a different way, it means that there's a 95% chance that your result is correct. Right? So statisticians, people who do statistics researchers have suggested that so long as you can say that there's a 95% chance that your result is right, then that's okay. Then that's good. Then you've got a reliable, solid result. Okay, so so long as your p-value is less than 0.05, then you can say there is a difference. So let's go back to our results here. Self-promotion demerits average. Our p-value is shown as less than 0.001. So 0.001, is this less than 0.05? Right, remember that in order to say that there is a difference, this p-value has to be less than 0.05. Is 0.001 less than 0.05? Yes, it is. This is a smaller number than this number. Right? So we can say that there is a significant difference between the US and Japan on how much people focus on the demerits of, or the bad things associated with showing off on Facebook. But just because we can say that this difference that we found was a significant difference or a reliable difference, that doesn't tell us anything about how big the difference is, how meaningful the difference is. In order to say anything about how meaningful the difference is, we need to use an effect size. That is it a big or small difference? For t-tests, to get an effect size, we use Cohen's d. So if the d is around 0.20, it's a small effect. If the d is around 0.50, it's a medium effect. If the d is around 0.80, it's considered to be a large effect. And if the d is 1.20 or larger, it's a very large effect. So Jacob Cohen, he was a statistician, a researcher of statistics, and also a psychologist. from the US. He lived from 1923 till 1998. Very famous statistician and psychologist, and he's best known for his research, his work on effect sizes. So understanding using numbers how big a difference is, or how big an effect is, or how big a relationship is between two variables statistically. So if we go back to our result here, we see the effect size, the Cohen's d, is 0.699. Now, is that a big or a small difference? Let's go back and have a look. So our result back there was d equals 0.699. So is that, how big is that effect? So 0.699, it kind of comes somewhere in the middle of a medium and large effect. So you could say that this is a medium to large effect. Right, so there's a medium to large difference between the US and Japan regarding how much people focus on the demerits of self-promotion on Facebook. So, bringing all of this together, how to report t-test results. So remember that our hypothesis, our expectation, was that Facebook users in Japan would be more focused on the demerits of self-promoting on Facebook than Facebook users in the US. So to write this up, we say an independent samples t-test showed that compared to Facebook users in the US, brackets M equals 3.07, SD equals 1.10, right? We want to put in the average and standard deviation for the demerits scale in the US. Compared to Facebook users in the US, users in Japan, then we list the Japan average and standard deviation. M equals 3.81, SD equals 1.02. So compared to Facebook users in the US, users in Japan scored significantly higher on the Facebook self-promotion demerit scale, and then we put in the t-test results. So T brackets degrees of freedom. Here, this is degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom, and then T equals 6.01. Right, so this is the same as our results back here. The T value is 6.01, degrees of freedom 294. Then the P value, P is less than 0.001, and then the D value, D equals 0.70. So the D value, we want to round that up to 2 decimal places. So our D score back here is 0.699. We round that up to 2 decimal places, so that gives us D equals 0.70. Right, so this first part here, this first half, is just giving the numbers, right? We communicate to the reader the statistical numbers in our analysis. So an independent samples t-test showed that compared to Facebook users in the US, we list the numbers. Users in Japan scored significantly higher on the Facebook self-promotion demerit scale, and then list the t-test result numbers, right? But the reality is that a lot of people won't understand all of these numbers. They'll be like, oh, just tell me in plain language what this means. So when we report statistical test results, we always give the hard numbers, but then we always interpret those results into normal everyday language. So we have the numbers here, and this means that, what do these numbers mean? This means that Facebook users in Japan tend to emphasize, to a large extent, the demerits of self-promotion more than users in the US. Right, so we interpret these statistical results into everyday language that anybody would understand. So this means that Facebook users in Japan tend to emphasize, to a larger extent, the demerits of self-promotion more than users in the US. And then finally, this result supports H1, or hypothesis 1. So remember, way back, we made an expectation, or a hypothesis. Our hypothesis was Japan Facebook users focus on the demerits of self-promotion on Facebook more than US users. All right, so we did all of this analysis to see if our expectation, our hypothesis, was correct or not. And we found that our analysis supported that hypothesis. It confirmed that hypothesis. Okay? So, based on all of this, I would like you to try on your own to figure out if there is a difference between the US and Japan on how much people focus on the merits of self-promoting on Facebook. All right, so the first step will be to make a hypothesis. Who do you think would emphasize merits more, US or Japan Facebook users? State your expectation. State your hypothesis. Right? So I'd like you to think, in which country would Facebook users focus on the merits of showing off on Facebook? Japan or the US? Right? Write out your expectation. So this is your homework now. Write out your expectation and then do the analysis. You'll need to create average self-promotion merit scores per person, and then do an independent samples t-test to test that. Okay, so that is your homework. I will put a worksheet on Moodle. Let's have a quick look at that worksheet. Here we go. So this is what the worksheet would look like. So here we go. I've already given you a hypothesis here. So the hypothesis is that Facebook users from the US score higher than users from Japan on the Facebook self-promotion merits scale. So I want you to write in the US average for the self-promotion merit scale. I'd like you to write in the US standard deviation for the self-promotion merit scale. Japan average, Japan standard deviation. Do an independent samples t-test in jamovi and report the t-value, the degrees of freedom, the p-value, and the effect size, following the instructions that I gave you in this video. And then I would like you to type out or write out the results. Right? Now, writing out the results, of course, is writing it like this. So you can pretty much just copy and paste this text and just change the numbers and change the this second part, and of course change the variable names. But you can use this this text as a kind of like a model for how to write your results. Okay, so you'll see the hypothesis 1 that I'd like you to test, but also I would like you to test this hypothesis as well. Facebook users from the US score higher than Japan users on the Facebook self-promotion scale. All right, so in the data file that's in the link in the description below, and also is in the link on Moodle, you'll find that there is a self-promotion average score. I'd like you to use that to compare Japan and the US on self-promotion, and I'd like you to find the US average, standard deviation for the US, Japan average, Japan standard deviation, the t-value associated with the independent samples t-test, degrees of freedom, p-value, effect size, and then write out a report. Okay, so that is your homework for this week. I will ask you next week what your results were. So try to do that, and we will go through this a little bit next week as well. But please try on your own to find out what the results are for these two hypotheses in the worksheet. I'll put the worksheet on Moodle in Word format and PDF format, so you can just choose whichever. You can either print it out and write things out by hand, or you can just type things in directly using Word. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. Otherwise, good luck, and I will see you next week. Thanks, guys.